If you're thinking about investing in property and you're nervous about taking that first step, you're unsure what to actually do, then this video is for you. I'm going to run through the 3 key steps that you need to take before you even start investing, right the way through to purchasing a property and receiving an income, so that you can take that leap and not feel alone. There are numerous ways which you can invest in property, but for the purpose of this video, we're going to cover the simplest investment you can make as a beginner, which is buy-to-let. Buy-to-let is essentially purchasing a property with the aim of leasing it out or renting it out to a tenant and receiving a monthly income. Let's get started. The first question you should ask yourself is, what do I want to achieve and what are my goals? If you have a clear picture of what you want to achieve, it makes the rest of the process much easier, as you can then figure out how many properties you might need to actually succeed or what level of income you might actually need. For example, I had 2 main goals from property. Number 1 was to leave something of value for my children, even though my eldest is only 12 and my youngest is still crawling around. And number 2 is 20 properties in the next 10 years so that I can receive the level of income that I desire while still in my 40s. This leads on to the next question, which you should be asking yourself: what is my long-term plan? What does 10, 20, even 30 years from now look like for you? If you own property for that long, you are going to have to do a number of refurbs. Things are going to go wrong, roofs will leak, you'll get damp, bad tenants, etc. But you'll also have made a lot of money, so during that time you need to figure out if you're going to reinvest that money or are you just going to remain small and take a small profit. Maybe you even want to build new builds, purchasing land and building from the ground up. These answers are critical because it leads into the last question we need to ask ourselves before moving into the costs, which is, what structure are we actually going to do this in? This is one of those decisions that getting right at the beginning could save you or cost you thousands and your children in the future. When I say structure, there's a number of options available to you, and you can do some research on this, it's really important. Number 1 is, are you going to purchase property in your own name, or are you going to purchase property through a limited company where you are the director of that company using your own cash as an injection? If there is only one piece of advice which you take from this section, it is to seek professional help, as this decision will be dependent on your current as well as your future financial situation. There are lots of pros and cons of purchasing property through either personal name or through limited company. Make sure you investigate these before moving on to the next section, which is costs. Unless you're purchasing a property outright, the first cost you need to be aware of is a deposit. The deposit will be used as a part payment towards a mortgage. When you purchase buy-to-let property, you'll need a specific buy-to-let mortgage. These are different from residential mortgages, the rates are slightly higher, and they do differ as well between whether you purchase property through a limited company or in your own name. Buy-to-let mortgages typically require a larger deposit, and although you can borrow up to 80% of the property value from a mortgage, the recommendation is no more than 75% because of the high cost of servicing the mortgage. One thing to note is that you will always be asked to provide proof of costs. So when you put an offer in for a property, they will ask you to verify that you've got the funds in your account and send proof of that. The next cost to consider is stamp duty, and you'll also be required to provide proof of this when you put an offer in on a property. Stamp duty is a land tax from the UK government and will be required to be paid assuming you already have an existing property, or if the property you're purchasing is over 40,000 in value. I'll leave a link in the description below for you to go to a stamp duty calculator to work out the cost for your potential property investment. Next up is solicitors' fees. Unfortunately, even if you purchase property through cash, you'll still be required to pay solicitors' fees. You'll be looking to pay around £1,000 for solicitors' costs, or if you purchase through a limited company, slightly higher, about £1,500. Once you have these costs complete, the next one is the mortgage, and that is the first of what I call the 3 M's. You do need to be aware that to purchase a buy-to-let mortgage, you'll need to be over 21 years old if you're a sole applicant, or you can be as young as 18 if you are purchasing with somebody else. One thing which is misunderstood with buy-to-lets in the UK is that you do have to have an existing property. This information is incorrect. You don't have to have an existing property or have purchased previously in order to invest in buy-to-let. One thing to note, however, is that purchasing a property under the value of £50,000 will restrict the lenders who will lend to you. It's definitely worth seeking independent advice on this, and there's free mortgage advice you can receive. For example, I use London & Country, and I'll leave their link in the description below. Mortgage costs for a buy-to-let are typically higher than a standard residential property. If you also purchase through a limited company, those costs will be slightly higher again, about 1% higher than your standard buy-to-let rates. You can compare these rates on websites such as comparethemarket.com. You also need to be aware of stress income cover ratio, or SICR. This effectively is what the mortgage lender will require to evaluate to make sure that you can afford your buy-to-let mortgage. SICR compares the value of the loan you're paying against the returns you'll receive from rental income and also the cost of servicing the mortgage. You'll need to work out the annual interest the lender is validating again, which in the current market could be as high as 8 or 9%. Secondly, you'll need to multiply that cost by the standard rental cover percentage, which is anywhere between 125 and 145%. This will give you the minimum income you need to receive from your buy-to-let in order to be accepted. Lenders are making these calculations very strict, so you need to make sure that your buy-to-let is giving you fantastic returns. We will cover this in the next section, so don't go anywhere, otherwise you'll miss out on key tips of how to maximise your returns. If you're finding this video useful so far, please hit the like button and also subscribe so you can see further videos on this series where we'll be talking about investments, not just on property but in life in general. The second M which we're going to cover is management. And management fees of properties are around about 6 to 10% on average, depending on where you are. You don't have to necessarily use a management company to manage your property. You can actually self-manage. And for my first buy-to-let, I did just that to keep the costs down and make sure that I was getting as much of the returns back to my bank account as possible. But when you scale a business, you will need to have support. And this is where management fees will come in. Those management fees, however, are really important if you want to have a more hands-off approach and don't want to be disturbed, because when something then breaks or goes wrong, the tenant will be calling the management company and not you, which saves you your valuable time. One thing to be aware of, however, is that there are certain regulations if you manage yourself, you will have to adhere to. For example, you have to make sure that you adhere to GDPR policies. You'll also need to make sure that your gas safety is up to date, your electrical checks are completed, your EPC rating means that your property is within the right band, etc. But it can also save you a lot of money doing it this way. The last M of the 3 M's is maintenance. You might hear others saying 10% of your rental income should be put aside for maintenance, but I'd suggest in your first year or so setting aside 15 to 20%. You never know when you're going to have void periods where you've got to pay council tax, or you could have issues with the rental property such as a leaky roof or damp issues, etc. And if you don't have a buffer there to pay that, you'll be paying out of your own pocket, which could get expensive. So that covers the costs that you'll need to be aware of. The last section is actually the process to go through and purchase a property and the steps you need to take in order to put an offer in and have a property accepted and then to rent it out. When you purchase your first property, you need to make sure first of all that it aligns to the requirements that you have as an investor, so that you purchase in the right area. For example, you're not going to be purchasing a property in Kensington if you only have 30,000 as an investor. From the flip side, if you have 200,000 for an investment, it doesn't mean to say you should be going out and looking to purchase a property for 800,000. You should be looking at the best way to maximise your returns with the amount you've got ready to invest. Digging in a little deeper, I'll give you some useful tips on the sweet spot of property costs and how to maximise returns versus your investment. I found out pretty early on that if you purchase a property for 100,000 and get a rental income, say of 600 a month, it doesn't equate to a property in the same area being 200,000 and giving you an income of 1,200 a month. In other words, purely from a return perspective, it'd be more beneficial to buy the properties that give you the maximum return or yield than it would do to buy more expensive properties, unless you're looking for capital growth. When it comes to capital growth, however, nothing is guaranteed, so I'd always go over guaranteed returns from rental incomes as opposed to relying on growth. With my experience looking at thousands of properties both in the UK and abroad and purchasing many properties over the years, I can tell you that a yield of around 10% is perfectly achievable, and you shouldn't really be looking at any less than that for a profitable property investment. So what is yield? Yield is basically the total rental income that you'll receive for a year. So say for example you have rental income of 7,500 for the first year and your property cost you 75,000, then your yield is 10%. It's the rental income divided by the cost of the property. One thing to note is that in the current market, you need that rental yield to be really high, otherwise you aren't going to be making enough of a return and it won't be such a good investment. So how do you actually find an area and a property to invest in? This is where hours and hours of research that I've put in has really helped. So for me, when I purchased properties around the sort of 70 to 80,000 pound mark, I look to purchase in the Midlands, the North East and the North West, as well as in Wales. The best thing for you to do is understand the area which you'd like to invest in, whether that's close to your home or whether that's somewhere else in the UK, and then look at comparables of property prices versus rental income to see if the rental income matches your needs as an investor. One thing to make sure you do is just understand the area which you're investing in. I couldn't believe it when I found properties for 20,000 in Hartlepool and then quickly found out there's a massive problem there with job shortage and social economic issues, etc. So it's worth understanding the area you're investing in to make sure the property you purchase is both good value and a good investment. Once you find an area and a property in that area, speak to local agents. Don't be afraid to call them up and speak to estate agents. They have a wealth of information about the area, the property prices, and also what tenants are looking for, and they'll happily give you that information if you ask them to. One thing to mention, however, is don't be fully led by one estate agent. Speak to multiple agents and also do your own research. The fact that you're purchasing a property in an area and will be using that property to rent out should give the estate agent enough of an incentive to provide you information that could be helpful for you. Use that relationship going forward. You don't stay in touch with them and give them your name and ask them to actually provide you more information with properties that may come on the market. Before you put an offer in, even if it's an auction property, you should view the property first. When I viewed the first few properties that I purchased, I had no idea what I was looking for. I would turn up to the house, knock on the door, go in, talk to the people, they sounded nice, it looked in good condition, fantastic. You need to be looking for signs of wear and tear on the outside of the house. Is there any cracks? Does the roof look in good condition? Are the gutters leaking? You'll see signs of that if there's watermarks down the walls and exterior of the house. Remember, you're making an investment, and it's really important that investment doesn't come with problems from the off. To be honest, for your first few properties, if you have no experience in what to look for, I would definitely recommend getting a home buyer survey completed for the property. These home buyer surveys will cost in the region of about £500 and will give you a full rundown of the state of the property, what's potentially needing to be replaced, where issues may be, and they'll give you like a red, amber and green view of the property and the risks associated with those areas. Next, once you've viewed the property on the outside, you want to actually go inside, and this is where you'll speak to the current owners and start to look around. And again, you're looking for things that could be high cost for replacement. So are kitchens and bathrooms in good condition? Is the plasterwork in good condition? Does the property smell of damp? How about carpets? Are the windows good? Electrical? Do the electrics need replacing? These are things that are going to cost you a lot of money. Again, the boiler, gas and central heating. Is there central heating? Does it need replacing? Does the boiler work, etc, etc. Just bear in mind, from the time you actually go and view a property to actually making a purchase, it can often be 3, 4, 5 months even. Don't be afraid to go back and look at a property several times in different weather conditions, at daytime, at night time, etc, to see how that property is holding up. You may pick up on things which you've missed from the first viewing. Although this video isn't a video about how to get the lowest price in purchasing a property, you should be looking at using any of the information you've gleaned from the survey you may have carried out and from your own viewings to get the property for the best price. You need to first of all find out why the property's been sold. Maybe the current owners are moving abroad, maybe they found their dream home and they need to move quickly. Is the property empty and could be costing whoever owns it money? These are all information that you can use to actually barter and get that price of that home down to the value you want to get it for. Another point to be aware of is that just because a property is up for sale for, say for example, 100,000, it doesn't mean it's worth 100,000. It could be worth 95,000 or even 85,000. You'll be able to see a rough indication of property prices in the area by looking at recent sold prices on Rightmove and also what other properties are up for sale in the same area and give you a comparable. An overvalued property is going to be much harder to get the price down to fair value than it would be for a property that's already listed at fair value. I've had this personally numerous times when purchasing my own property, where the property I'd really like to purchase was just overvalued and the vendor just did not want to drop the price. Once you're happy with everything, the next step is to submit an offer. This is where I suggest putting an offer in that's going to be low enough that it's going to be rejected. By doing this, you understand exactly the point in time where the owner of the property is actually willing to sell. Don't be afraid to put an offer in that's too low. One thing I would caution against, however, is going too low and actually offending the owner of the property. Submitting an offer in email as opposed to verbally. Doing it this way will mean that you'll be able to put the reasons down for your offer and why the price might be lower than what it's advertised for, but also it allows you to pitch yourself as an investor or property purchaser and the reasons why the vendor should be considering you as a purchaser. Once your offer is accepted, typically the estate agent will ask you for proof of funds, and this will be your deposit as we covered earlier, as well as your fees for stamp duty. The next step after that is then to find a solicitor, and the solicitor will start the engagements with the estate agency, and they both can advise you on next steps. The next step is to find a tenant. I typically undertake this process myself to ensure that I find someone that I trust renting my property. I use Open Rent, and there's a number of services on the website which will allow you to make this process much simpler. There are 3 key questions that I ask any potential tenant before I rent them my property. Number 1 is why they're actually looking to move and where they've come from. Number 2 is what is their history, and can they provide me information about who they've rented from previously? And the last but the most important is, can they provide me a homeowner guarantor? Although I don't rent all my properties to somebody who has got a guarantor, it is definitely recommended, because if you have a tenant that doesn't pay the bills or trashes your house, you know there is always somebody you can go back to actually reclaim those costs. This concludes the video. I hope it's been really helpful for you as a beginner property investor to understand the steps to take around buy to let. Thanks for watching, and catch you soon.